Hey there, friends. Welcome back to another one of the installments of the 31 Days of Samhain. If you're just finding us this late in the series, my name's Melina. I'm the co-owner of Pathways Books here in St. Louis, Missouri. This is part of a series that kind of grew out of our wonderful Facebook community. And each day up to Samhain, we are talking about different aspects of Samhain and different things we can do. Pardon me. I record these really early in the morning before the store starts, so I'm a little froggy still. As weather in St. Louis here can be a little strange sometimes. But today I wanted to start talking about the next in the final portion of the 31 Days of Samhain, a little section that I'd like to talk about on ritual. So over the next few days, each of these videos will build on each other so that by the time that Samhain gets here, you will be able to make your own ritual that is completely yours. One of the things that we seem to run into a lot here at the shop is that people come in and they either want to do spells or a ritual, but they only want to do it out of a book that someone else has written, and they kind of think that that's the only way that they can go, which is of course not true. So this is with the intention of helping you create your own ritual that's very personal to you. So I have a list of notes up on my whiteboard here, so you'll occasionally see me look over because there's things I want to make sure that I don't miss. So as we said, today we're going to talk about different ideas you might want to have for your ritual. So when I say ideas, I mean more like a focus or an intention. So today we're going to go over a list that I have over some things you might want to consider when building your own ritual. So today we're going to talk about ideas, and then I think tomorrow I have slated that we're going to actually talk about like the format or the outline or the bones. So it's helpful to have your intention ready first before you start building the actual idea of how you want your ritual to go, because sometimes if you have your focus ahead of time, then it will allow you to be more creative in how you bring that about. It's like every ritual isn't performed the same way. And for any of you that have been around for a while already know this, but we do have a lot of folks that have just found us and have just found paganism or witchcraft or whatever label you want to slap on it. And there's not just one way to do ritual. So there's different things that you can do in order to like put more energy into the ritual to have it give more meaning for you. So that's what we're going to talk about. So today's our ideas are kind of like our focus, our seed thought. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the framework for your ritual, because you'll be inspired to like do things a little differently and come up with some unique ideas on how to make it more meaningful to you. And then as we go along, we're also going to touch on some rituals from other traditions in case there's something there that you'd like to work in, of course leading up to actual Samhain itself. So let's talk about some ideas that you could have. So one of the things a lot of people do, especially at Samhain, is they focus on the aspect of divination. So it's a really good time to ask like those big deep questions from spirit and your guides and teachers. People do that through a variety of ways, of course. They'll do it through tarot cards, they'll do it through pendulums, through runes, any variety of things there. Scrying mirrors and scrying bowls are very big this time of year. So as an example, if you want to work some sort of divination into your own ritual that you'll be creating, you might want to start thinking ahead of like, what deck do I want to use? Do I want to work with one rune, or do I want to do a casting of runes? You could do a casting of gemstones, which we'll talk about a little in another portion of the 31 days. If you're doing scrying, you might want to consider like figuring out, do I want to use a mirror? Do I want to use a bowl? Things like that. Also, a good thing that people sometimes do this time of year is deity veneration. Veneration is like making contact and showing reverence and respect for. So if you were looking to create a stronger connection with a deity, like starting, you can kind of crack that door open. But if you've not worked with a deity, especially like any of those darker deities this time of year, this is not the time to step into ritual and then call on Hecate and say, help, throw me a bone, help me out. especially if you haven't established any sort of connection with that deity. Now, if you go into this with the idea of, I would like to create a connection with you or deepen a connection with you, that's something else. But you don't want to just step into ritual on Samhain and then, talk to some deity and ask it for help that you've never worked with before. Just a really, not necessarily a bad idea, but just not very effective. They say that deity listens to those that talk to them the most often. So if you just come out of the blue, you're probably not going to get a lot of attention anyway. It's also a good time, like if you are already working with a deity, besides like asking them a big question like that, but it's also just a good time to show a bit of worship, as in the form of, giving thanks to that deity for what they've helped you with throughout the year. And just like if you were to say create an altar, Hecate is an easy one because she's very popular this time of year. But say you want to create an altar to Hecate and make some offerings to her on Samhain, that's totally fine. And that some people also do that. You also want, if you want to begin a path, we had talked about that just a few minutes ago. So you may want to like put out the intention that you would like to start working with a deity, or that you would like to start to learn something in particular. As we've always talked about at Samhain, the veil between the worlds is very thin, so it's easier for that communication to get through with spirit. Keeping in mind, I have to say this, keeping in mind we are still in a Mercury retrograde, so semantics are very important. Choose your words carefully. A good catchphrase is this or something better for my highest growth and greatest good with harm towards none. So mote it be. I'll say it again. It's worth repeating. This or something better, because deity has the larger worldview than we do. This or something better for my highest growth and greatest good with harm towards none, that includes you, so mote it be. So let's see. We've talked a lot about ancestor contact. So of course, if you want to make connection with any of your ancestors in spirit, we've talked about that a few times now. Healing work is it's a good time for healing work, again, because deity, the veil is thin and that communication back and forth is good. So you can also, we'll talk a little bit more about healing work just a little bit further down in the outline that I've got going on here. You also might want to consider doing lunar work. Like this time we actually have our second full moon of the month, and it's on Samhain on the 31st. So you may want to think about doing some of that moon work or lunar energy work. As of when this is being recorded, which is 2020, we've had a lot of rain in the area. So you may want to consider collecting some rain that you could use in your ritual on Samhain, especially if you want to work with the moon. So like if you collect that water and you want to scry in a scrying bowl, you can take that water and put it in there when you scry on Samhain. That's a good way to go. Let's see. Oh, I wrote down karma work, and I want to be really, really careful about this. We have a lot of folks that come to us and they're like, I'm having all these problems. I want to resolve my karma. I want to work through my karma. And it kind of makes you want to go, ooh, take a giant step back. Because it is right and well and good to want to resolve and work on your karma. Just be very aware that karma, much like shadow work, sometimes they include both, can be very messy. And I don't say that to scare anybody, but I'm just trying to be a realist here. Sometimes when you ask for the resolution of karma, the universe will present you with situations and as an opportunity for growth, which is kind of a phrase that we joke around with here. It's like, oh, yay, another opportunity for growth, which in the end is good, but is often uncomfortable, messy, and sometimes painful, much like shadow work. Okay, another thing I wanted to touch on was the idea of a land blessing or gratitude, especially if you know of a place that has been quote unquote abused or neglected. To do any sort of like offering for the land, for the healing for the land, is a great idea. And that idea actually came out of a book called The Sacred Herbs of Samhain by Ellen Everett Hopman. I always have trouble saying her name. But that is a book that I love, love, love. It's a great book, Sacred Herbs of Samhain. But they actually talk in there about doing an offering to the land for like healing for the land, in whether it be physical land or metaphorical. You know, like the idea of America as a whole, we seem to be going through a lot of problems in the last, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years. And doing some healing on behalf of that metaphorical idea of America would be helpful too. Just as much as like parks and or graveyards or things that have been neglected. Another thing is the idea of a hearth fire. So we've talked a bit about the hearth before when we talked about kitchen witchery. The hearth can be a physical place or it can be a metaphorical place. So we've talked before about the hearth of the home. So whether that's like your stove, like we talked about in kitchen witchery, or the metaphorical idea of the hearth within the space that you live in. You could have what's called a need fire or a hearth fire. And whether it's like outside at a bonfire or whether it's inside in a cauldron in your house, it's the idea of setting that energy, establishing that space, and working with the healing energetics of the hearth fire or the need fire. The need fire is typically when you had a need and you petitioned spirit and you built this fire on behalf of the gods or goddesses that you are talking to. And the whole establishing the actual fire is a whole different thing. There's different woods that you can use. You can, I've been in ritual where they've started to build the fire from the ground up and they've put sigils or symbols in the dirt before they ever started to build the fire. They would say prayers or sing when they chop the wood to infuse the wood with the energy. There's certain ways that you can lay the wood in symbols for when the fire burns. There's things like, besides saltpeter that makes things kind of poof, there are like herbs and things that you can add to the fire as an offering. So fire in and of itself could be a whole separate talk all on its own. You can also do the hearth fire as a need for purification or renewal. And we've talked about it before. When we want to create something new, we have to sacrifice something, and it has to be something that like means something to us. So in the idea of sacrificing something or sacrificing the old to the hearth fire, sometimes it's those things that we carry around with us that we need to let go of, and for some reason we're holding on to those things. So past hurts and things that maybe we've done we've not been so proud of, and we carry that stuff around with us. Give that over to the fire, allow that to be transmutated, and allow deity to change that energetic into something else that's going to serve you much better. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of, it kind of dovetails into the idea of the hearth fire, but the idea of establishing your own home base. So in this day and age, a lot of us move around and find ourselves in different places. And the idea of establishing a home base, like metaphorically in your home, gives you that place of sanctuary and safety to come back to. So kind of like when we're being buffeted around by all the things going on in the world, when we create that energetic hearth fire or home base, it gives us a place to come back to that's stable and secure. It allows us to find that connection to deity in that space. Kind of like the same way people go to church. Like if they're really, really devoted to their church, that's kind of their home base. Similar idea. So at the Samhain, you might want to create a ritual to dedicate the idea of a home base or a hearthstone, it's sometimes called, in your home. Now you can actually take a stone, or you can just like use your altar space and dedicate. It's kind of like dedicating an altar space, but you can also do that. And you can also do a dedication to yourself, which a lot of people don't talk about, but is very important. It's like you can do all this work to make this connection with deity and do all this work to make this connection with source or whatever energetic you want to touch in with. But a lot of us don't do enough work that dedicates to ourself. And like an example of that would be I'm dedicating this next year to myself to become more healthy, or to have better personal boundaries, or if you have a goal or something in mind. So a dedication to yourself is just as important as a dedication to a deity or healing work or karma work or anything like that. I think I've covered everything on the giant whiteboard that I have written down here. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you'll start thinking about what you'd like your focus to be for your own personal Samhain ritual. And when we come back in the next segment of the 31 Days of Samhain, we will be talking about how you can create your own framework. I'll give you kind of an idea for an outline. And of course, you don't have to choose everything. You can kind of cherry pick what you'd like to include. I know this was a little bit longer, but I felt like this was a really important one. So thanks as always for joining us for the 31 Days of Samhain, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks so much. Blessed be.